I'm going to talk about my course over in the School of Public Health, Genetics, Health Behavior, and Health Education. So I was recruited to U of M to kind of fill a gap that our department had. We have a public health genomics program at our school, but nobody within my department knew anything, it seemed, about how genetics might fit into the picture. So I teach this course that's part of that certificate program. It's a master's level course, so it's designed primarily for MPH students, although I often get genetic counseling and human genetics students from the medical school as well. It's a smaller course than I think some of the others we've considered today, usually only about 15 to 20 students, and I use a hybrid of both lectures and discussions throughout the semester. When I introduce you to this acronym, if you don't already know it, it's called LC, Ethical, Legal, and Social Implications. There's actually a division within NIH that funds research in this area. And I think it kind of captures what my course is about. A lot of what we talk about are these broader implications of genomics discoveries. It's not so much about the basic science of genetics, but what are the implications as we move genetics discoveries into healthcare and into broader society. I just want to reassure you guys, if you happen to be a former member of Technophobes Anonymous, you can still adopt some of the tools I will be talking about. In fact, I think my students would get a kick that I'm actually part of this panel, because I'm always the guy who can't figure out how the sound is working and has to have some student come up and help rewire the computer. So what I'm going to be talking about is eminently adoptable, even if you don't have a lot of innate technical skills. So what I use CTools to do, I use it for a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on three things in particular. One is to enhance access to information resources. The second is to promote discussion of course topics as kind of a complement to what we do in class. And then finally, more specific to my content area, is to consider how genetic discoveries are portrayed in mass media, because that's an important theme within the course. So let's start with enhancing access to information. So I think we've all talked about using the resources section. A lot of people put their PDFs of articles up. But I actually try to embed some other types of information as well in resources. So I've been able to get, and I use it both in resources, and then also I have a new section that I'll talk about called Library DVR that the Ask With Media Library has helped me with. So for example, we talk a lot about what's the experience like of people who face genetic disorders or are family members, and that's kind of hard to get from just dry journal articles. So I actually have a couple of documentary films that can be viewed within the CTools site. Their assignment for that week, instead of maybe reading a particular article, might be to actually view a documentary film on what it's like to live at risk for breast cancer or Huntington's disease. So I think that really is appreciated and kind of conveys this fuller sense of what the lived experience of genetic disorders might be about. I also like to assign video clips from leading news media. So for example, I feature a couple video clips from the New York Times. Amy Harmon is a reporter there who's won a Pulitzer Prize for her series called The DNA Age. And so she's covered a lot of the topics that we address in our course. So here's just a couple screenshots. So this was a video as part of that DNA Age series on embryo screening. You may have heard that we have increasing capabilities now using genetic technologies. For example, there's a technique known as PGD, or pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, where in concert with in vitro fertilization, a prospective parent could screen embryos for mutations that cause diseases. And so it feels in some ways like this brave new world technology, but for families who are, maybe are ravaged by hereditary cancer syndromes, it's a very valuable tool. So we talk about some of the broader ethical implications of PGD and use this video as an example. Here's the library DVR section I mentioned earlier. So the library was able to take this 50/50 documentary, for example, and embed it within the site as an assignment. So the students would just go to this section of the website and click on the documentary and watch it as their assignment. We talk some about genetics in pop culture. So because again, a lot of people's understanding or attitudes about genetics might be shaped by media portrayals. So the kind of quintessential film I'm always asked about at cocktail parties is the motion picture Gattaca. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, came out in the late 90s. It's where Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman actually met and got married, for those of you culture aficionados. But I think it really is a great example of kind of the dystopic thinking that a lot of people have. It portrays this future where people are kind of stratified into different classes based on their genetic potential, and Ethan Hawke kind of is trying to fight against his innate deficits. And so I think even though it seems far-fetched, in certain respects, it also, I think, captures kind of our unease sometimes as a society when we think about genetic information being overused or misused in terms of kind of predicting the destiny of different people. Another way I use CTools to enhance students' access to information is through the discussion section. So I'll have usually I mention variety of resources in class. So I usually, after each class, will post some entry and discussion where I'll have web links to a lot of these different resources. Things like professional organizations in the field, leading research centers, and other supplemental materials that aren't already in the resources section. So for example, we might have things like the Bain NIH Institute around genomics and societies, NHGRI. There's an outfit called NichePeg, which is devoted to health professional education in genomics. There's advocacy groups like Genetic Alliance. Johns Hopkins has a very prominent Genetics and Public Policy Center. Gene Test is kind of a nice library of different genetic tests that are used clinically. So I'm under no illusions. I'm sure when students are several years out, they're not going to remember all the specific details, but I think if I can arm them with a set of credible resources that they could take with them, even if they aren't doing genetics primarily in their work, they'll be able to kind of refer back to some of these resources that are kind of nicely collected for them. And then I really like this site too. University of Utah has a Learn Genetics site, particularly because in my class there's a wide range of background that people have. Some people come in knowing a lot about genetics, but some people are health education students who just think it's important to learn but really have no background. So these kinds of resources can be helpful for them, offline, to try to learn a little bit more, to brush up maybe on particular concepts or terms that they might not know a lot about. The second piece that I've got is promoting class discussion here. So I assigned students at the beginning of the semester into 3 cleverly named groups, D, N, and A. And so each of them, usually about a group of 6 per discussion group. And at various points during the semester, they're assigned to respond to a particular topic in the forum section that Amy mentioned earlier. So the nice thing about this is it enables them to consider particular topics or readings that I think it's important for them to comment on. And those submitted responses are due before class, and that helps prime the in-class discussion. So I have one of those setups where it's like two arcs or semicircles, and so let's say it was the N group's turn that week, they would actually be assigned to sit in the inner circle. I like to kind of mix up the seating dynamics in class as well. And, but they would kind of come ready to talk because they've already submitted a response online. And just to give you a sense of what this looks like, so in the form section I have these kind of broader topics that are covered for the week, and then I have a specific entry that they would respond to within that broader topic. So you can see the kind of range of topics that we cover and some of the specific examples that we have for a CTools forum. I'll just show one in particular. I do research in genetic testing for Alzheimer's disease. So this was Group D's assignment in mid-March. So we talk a lot about this issue of access to genetic information. It's becoming a hot topic because you may have heard about, there's some companies now that are offering direct-to-consumer genetic testing. You submit a saliva sample to them and they kind of provide you a personalized website with access to a lot of genomic information. There's a lot of controversy about who should have access, what types of information. So we use Alzheimer's as an example to discuss this issue. So I pose a couple discussion questions about should patients have access to Alzheimer's genetic risk information, because the medical community actually has come out to say we shouldn't have access because this is a fatal, incurable disease. Genetic risk information isn't going to inform medical care, so we therefore generally withhold it from people. But a lot of people are interested, so then students kind of weighed in on this topic, and you can see the different entries that they had here. Again, Mika mentioned the point of it's hard to kind of, sometimes I was hoping maybe it would kind of create a flurry of Facebook-style back and forth. It hasn't really done that so much, but at least I think it enables me to see how they're engaging with those topics. And like I said, I think it does facilitate the in-class discussion that we have about the same topic. And then at the end of the semester, I don't grade individual posts, but because it's archived, I'm able at the end of the semester to kind of bring their different posts together and kind of grade that as a body of work. My final topic is genetics in the media. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it's an important topic for my course because, again, a lot of our understanding in the general public can be shaped by media coverage. I mentioned this idea there's an increased commercialization of genetic services. And there's been a concern for a while about this phenomenon known as genohype. Again, the overrating of genetic findings. And the sociologist Dorothy Nelkin had a book called The DNA Mystique that kind of captures this notion of we tend sometimes to invest genetic discoveries, genetic information with a lot of meaning that's different than other types of health information. So these are just some examples of the way we've seen genetics covered in the media. So you can see things like the New York Times magazine, Steven Pinker's went through his own personal genomic testing. He's writing about it. Time magazine named the retail DNA test invention of the year in 2008. Science, so in the science literature, their breakthrough of the year was human genetic variation. Wired magazine is here, Forbes magazine. So these are all major publications across a variety of readerships. And so I think, again, this gives the sense of how this is being portrayed. So my students have an assignment. They have to submit at one point during the semester an example of news coverage of genetics, and then they have to comment on that news story. And so what they don't cover is actually this fake example of news coverage of genetics in the media. Scientists discovered gene responsible for eating a whole goddamn bag of chips. So I hope that they can actually be able to distinguish fake news from real news, although I do like this idea of the Pringle zones, an enzyme which creates a craving for salty fatty stuff. And one tool that they can use in critiquing media coverage is they're assigned an article by Holtzman et al. Is a very detailed framework. You might not be able to read the fine print here, but they have kind of this checklist of 37 points that the ideal news story would have in providing information about genetics and genomics. So that's a framework that I think enables them to then apply to different news stories that they might encounter. Again, they're just assigned to do it once, but they hopefully then can kind of internalize that framework for themselves moving forward as they try to think about ways in the future in which the media covers genetics. So obviously there's a lot of future directions I could go in here. Again, I'm still trying to, maybe it's a pipe dream, but I'm still hoping to kind of generate a little bit more interactivity in the actual forums themselves so that there's a little bit more back and forth. So I'll have to think about how to do that. I've just kind of done, kind of like Amy was talking about, just some pretty simple evaluations. I have particular year-end evaluation items that kind of can be geared to certain technological tools, but I think I could try to do a little bit more in-depth evaluation of that. And then who knows, I think there are pockets of money through CRLT if I wanted to try to develop some of these components further. So I think this is important because if you think students now are interested in technology, I think that in the future they're only going to be more adept and more kind of demanding these types of tools. And so I think this idea of future generations being ready and interested in doing this further would be important for us to contend with. So thanks for your attention. If I can send slides to, if people are interested in the slides, that's my email address.